Good afternoon, everybody. It's Maurice Botha. I'm welcoming you to the session regarding preschool, partial care facilities, and aftercare at public schools, but we're also going to talk about aftercare at independent schools. And as normal, we will also make this available to all the member schools, and to all the participants will receive this PowerPoint. And should you have any questions, you should use the column on the comment column, and then you can on that side then put your questions in there. We'll try and attend to it during the session. Otherwise, we will email the answers personally to the people requesting the information. If we talk about preschool partial care facilities versus aftercare, we just want to make a distinction between preschool and partial care. Is basically your nursery school up to grade RR, meaning that you would interact with children from babies up to about 5 years old, while the aftercare is after school, and that's catering for after school children from grade R to grade 12. However, partial care can also form part of the aftercare for that specifically. And we will deal with the requirements of buildings and facilities and all of that. If we look at preschool partial care facilities, meaning this is now more your nursery schools, but also your partial care. Now, I'll give you the definition of partial care now. But if we look at the facilities, the requirements of the facilities for after schools are exactly the same as what we are going to discuss here. So if we want the definition of partial care is, and you find it in the Children's Act, Section 76, it says, partial care is provided when a person, whether for or without reward, meaning that if you do it free or if you charge any monetary value to that, takes care of more than 6 children. So the moment you take more than 6 children in, then you become a partial care facility. And then on behalf of their parents, caregivers, during specific hours, and specific hours are very important. The reason for that is we've got to indicate in our contracts what is our responsibility regarding hours of the day or night or for a temporary period by agreement. An agreement again is very important because this has to be a paper trail between the parents, caregivers, and the provider of the service. And that agreement specifically is a very important document. And as we continue, I will indicate what should be included into that document. So if it's a domestic house somewhere in a suburb and there's only 4 children in that house, then that is not a partial care facility because it's lesser than 6. So the moment you go over 6, then it becomes a partial care facility. If you continue in the Children's Act, you will find that the national norms and standards for partial care is a safe environment for children. What does that mean? That means it must be a properly fenced place. Children may not be able to enter out of the and go out of the property without any control. So there's got to be access control. And if we look internally in the property, it can be even stretched so far as poisonous plants that should not be available, dangerous objects that should be there. And we all know about the sand, the playing sand, that you've got to mix salt in and frequently mix salt in, or you have to sanitize the salt in one or other manner that is prescribed by the law. So that is all the aspects. So first national norm and standard is a safe environment for children, and that will differ from the place aftercare facility to aftercare facility. Some will have a sand pit, others won't have. Some will have a climbing ladder, others won't have a climbing ladder. Certain will have a garden with plants, others will not have that. The second requirement regarding the national norms and standards are the proper care for sick children and children that becomes ill. And we have to also here point out that you've got the COVID regulations applicable here, where you have to have a facility where you can take COVID isolation, where you can place a child in COVID isolation after exposing or indicating that the child has a temperature or coughing or anything like that. So you have to take cognizance of the COVID regulations that's applicable here. In other times, you have to have a sick room and proper care for sick children, children become ill. There must be a first aid medical box. And this now brings you to a conflicting interest because the caregivers are not allowed to give and prescribe medicine. And that is a problem. So you should only have that for emergency, maybe put a plaster on, but then I also recommend that as part of your admission or application form, you've got to have a separate basically form indicating what are the parents agreeing. You can use Vaseline, Elastoplast, Bactroban, whatever, and they must give you an indication there because it's small children, there will be injuries. Now and then there will be some bleeding of minor injuries, and you have to treat it there. But also, in addition to proper care of sick children, we have to go to the serious illnesses, maybe breaking an arm or losing a finger. And these are actual things that happened at partial care and nursery schools in a couple of years that we've been serving these people as clients. So what I'm saying to you, you've also got to have a policy in place, and it should be in your admissions form stating what should you do. Can you transport the child to the hospital if the parents are not available? If you find the parents, is that the first step what you should do? Can you refer them to the hospital? Can you get an ambulance to come and collect them? What are the responsibilities that the parents carry over to the school, and what can the school do then? So because we have to be specifically regarding these issues, and we have to include it either in a separate amendment to the admission form as part of the admission form. Thirdly, we need adequate space and ventilation. Obviously, space will be linked to the COVID regulations, but even if there was no COVID present, then you still need adequate space, meaning children must be able to lie, sleep, play on a carpet. There must be space for playing outside, so there must be adequate space, and ventilation obviously is also a factor that must be done and must be attended to, because if you've got good ventilation, it's actually a precautionary measure of having flu and other germs spreading. So good ventilation is a healthy environment for these toddlers that you might have to under your control there. However, if we look also at ventilation, there are occupational hygienists that you can involve, and they can come and measure ventilation for you, and they can indicate to you it's enough or not enough. But this is not a specific, but it says there adequate ventilation. Fourthly, you've got to supply safe drinking water. Now, in the urban areas, yes, it's not always fine because we know there was water problems with certain town councils, but it's your responsibility to supply safe drinking water. So we say that you've got to monitor the water supplied to you through the taps, and maybe take a decision and using a purifier or creating some method to ensure that the water that you supply to the children for drinking water is safe. And this is just an opinion that I'm saying, that with the water establishments in Pretoria, the facilities are not well kept. I think this is going to become a challenge in future, that you might move over to purified or bottled water at this stage to ensure that it's safe for drinking and to make sure that you don't create a risk for yourself through this. Hygienic and adequate toilet facilities. Obviously, toilet facilities has to be cleaned during regular interview. It's got to be inspected. It's got to be sanitized and hygienically for use. And the problem here, however, is with your non-potty trained learners or busy with potty training attending your facility, because they can mess up a place. So there's got to be very strict control regarding this. So, but we have to ensure that there's hygienic and adequate, meaning enough toilet facilities, and that you would find in ISO in the building regulations available, where you've got building regulation 4000, of the SABS, South African Bureau of Standards, where it gives you an indication of how many toilets would you need for children, should you need separate facilities, and also the height of the toilets, meaning how high are they from the ground, can be determined by the age children that you are giving space in your partial care facility. Then safe storage of anything that may be harmful to children. We're thinking about cleaning material, and also, we use maybe Handy Andy, we might use Jik, we might use other detergents that can be dangerous to children because they might assume it's cold drink and they might drink it. So there's got to be safe storage in a storeroom. Access control to that storage facility should be very, very strict to only specific people. People utilizing that for cleaning cannot leave the material used or the detergents used, that they can just leave it and leave the workstation, leave it within reach of the children. So we have to make sure that our cleaners are well trained and know what is the dangerous aspects of this if they should leave it unattended. Furthermore, the storekeeping of this, I think there should be inventory so that we can make sure that everything is kept behind a lock and a closed door and a locked door, and there must be a responsible person for that specifically. Furthermore, the national norms and standards for partial care says there's got to be access to the refuse disposal services and other adequate means of disposal of refuse generated at the facility. So obviously, if we look at partial cares, at most partial cares, there are food has been prepared there for the children over quite a time already. What do we do with the unused food and the old food that we're throwing away? Where is it kept, and how are we going to get rid of this? And specifically, if you then have babies in a nursery school and you still have nappies, that is a big health risk. So how are we going to get rid of that? How regularly? How are we going to safe keep it that the children cannot get to that? That is a challenge that we have to attend to and make sure maybe on a daily basis or even twice on a daily basis to remove it to a safe area, and then as soon as possible remove it from the safe area totally away from the facility. Then a hygienic area for the preparation of food for children. It's not only the facility, but the people working in there has to fulfill all the safety requirements for people preparing food. And not only, I mean, with overalls covering the hair, might use gloves for doing that. I also refer to the medical condition because we had a situation or two where the people that tested positive for TB who were preparing the food, and those people has to immediately be removed from the kitchen, right? And also from the workplace as such. So who's going to prepare the food then? So we've got to get a medical clearance that this person is, for instance, as example, not have TB, because that is dangerous and can be carried over the food by coughing over the food. So we had those challenges already. So we've got to look at those people working there, the equipment that they use, the facility, and we must see that all of that is hygienic, especially where food is prepared, and also the safekeeping and the warm keeping of the food that can also create a health risk. Then we have to have measures for the separation of children of different age groups, and where you will find it's the same on school grounds. We cannot have grade R mixing with the rest of the school. You can also not have small children under the age of 2 being exposed to other learners. You've got your grades, babies, and then a group 1, a group 2, group 3, group 4, and preferably those groups should be kept separately. If the facility was only catering for 6 people, this becomes a challenge, but with bigger groups, it becomes easier to separate the groups, but then you also need a much bigger facility to do that. But the fact of the matter is, if something goes wrong, for instance, an older child injures a young child and they should not be together and there's an investigation, you might end up with claims, civil claims against you for not fulfilling this requirement of separating children in different age groups. Following that, number J, the drawing up of action plans for emergencies. Obviously, if a child falls seriously ill maybe get a fit. We don't want to see that. We don't want to expose other children to that. How will we deal with that? How will we deal when there's a fire? How will we deal when there's water running through the building? We have to draw up plans for all of these emergencies. And then the one that we bumped in last week is with load shedding. A nursery school has to warm up the bottles for the babies. And with load shedding, they didn't have electricity supply, so the bottles could not be warmed up. You cannot afford to run a risk like that. So if you should have this, you most probably will have a separate electrical source, again, a generator or a battery system that can assist you in emergencies like that. I'm only giving the practical example. You know, we start something and we never think that the influence that we can have regarding power failures, and suddenly there's a power failure, or Eskom is working on the cable for the whole day, and then you can't warm the food. You might not cook food, so that's where gas comes into the kitchen. But if you bring gas again in, there's certain safety measures that you've got to put in place regarding the gas keeping of the bottles and utilizing that, and certain safety valves that will have to be in place. So action plans for emergencies, yes, we need it. A parent can ask you, give me your emergency plans. I want to see what are you going to do when an emergency arises. Then, number K, the drawing up of policies and procedures regarding healthcare at the facility. Obviously, we have to create policies. We've got to create policies for even, like example, the dress code of staff. How should they dress when they work? What is the fulfillment when children are playing? Can the people in charge sit and drink tea under the tree while the children are playing around? You can't afford things like that. So you will have policies. Furthermore, there will have to be procedures that has to be followed. For instance, a timetable, which group is playing, when are they sleeping, when are they eating, when are they getting, groups getting fetched by parents, when they can be dropped off. What is the procedure when they're dropped off? And we again with COVID, do we scan them when we bring them in? Do we scan them when they leave out? The parents coming in, do we scan them? So there's an immense lot of procedures and policies that you have to put in place. Remember, the guideline is always, when do you need a policy or a procedure? Firstly, to guide you in your decision making. Secondly, to protect you. Thirdly, to assist you to reach your goals. So those are the three requirements to determine, do I need a policy and a procedure? Yes, if it's going to assist me and guide me in decision making, help my goals and protect me, obviously need a policy. So there are different needs for different policies with different aftercare centers and partial care centers. Okay, registration. Partial care facilities must be registered with the provincial government of the province where the facility is registered. And in practice, it boils down that you've got to approach the nearest Department of Social Development or municipal office and complete Form 11. The question that will arise here is, but I have this partial care facility on a school ground, either independent or on public school ground. Should I register? The answer is yes, you do have to register. The fact that you're on school grounds does not guarantee you. Yes, your facility might fulfill all the requirements, but you've got to look at all the other requirements that we just discussed in the norms and standards. And it cannot be the same policies and procedures that is followed in the school, because this partial care facilities where you might have babies might differ completely from the school. And there will be different rules to the game. So you have to register even if you are on school grounds. If you then has to register, because I know there's a lot of schools that most probably has these facilities on the grounds, and they are run either by the school or by an external entity or by a community center. The fact is, how should this registration look? What should be included in your application? Firstly, your particulars, identity number, address, telephone numbers. That's if you're an individual person doing it. If you're a company, you obviously will use the company registration number, address, and telephone. If you use a trust, there will be trustees, and they will have to have a trust number Act number, a deed number, and they will also have a registered address and telephone number. The physical and postal address of the partial care facility. Why is that needed? To communicate. Although it doesn't say their physical and postal address, I can imagine the department will ask your email address also, because postal addresses are not used that much more. The number of children that you will accommodate by the facility, meaning over 6 then, because below 6 you don't need to do it, over 6, and if you go over 6, obviously there will have to be a breakdown of the age groups of the children that you're catering for, because that will lead to inspection of your property that you're going to utilize, that you will have to have different facilities, the height of the toilets that I've mentioned before, playing areas, separating age groups. So that's why they would like the number of children to be accommodated, but they will also require you to put in the age of all of these children. Furthermore, if you intend doing it, it's individual, you need to put up your qualifications, skills, and experience. And if it's a company, yes, the person designated to act as the supervisor, principal, or manager on that property, you will need those qualifications, skills, and experience, because part of this application is they've got to make sure that there's some person with the necessary qualifications, necessary experience, and necessary skills to do that. Obviously, they will do checks on the criminal check, on the sexual register for those people, because those people cannot be employed there. Furthermore, you'll have to add a description of the programs and services to be offered, including the aims and objectives. Now, this is a very interesting one if you're going to look at that. What programs? Are you going to do enrichment programs for physical abilities, certain skills, certain learning experiences, practical experience, Experilab? Or you're going to bring in animals from time to time? Certain partial care nursery schools does have their own animals that they expose children to for feeding. There are others that do planting of vegetables as such. So there's a lot of programs and services can you do, and then you've got to identify what is the aim and objective. It was recently in the news where a nursery school in the Western Cape are supplying indeed vegetables to the community as part of their project. So if you intend to do that, and that was a community running a partial care facility where they were producing spinach specifically and supplying the whole community with spinach. So that is the kind of program services, including the aims and objectives, that you have to include to that then. And that will also be related to your business plan, containing the business hours of your partial care facility. Is it only from 8 in the morning, 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning? I know that there's a lot of pressure with parents leaving for work early, that they want to drop off their children really at 6 o'clock to be in town for the work, where they have got maybe have to travel far, or they're starting at 7, but there's huge traffic volumes traveling on the road where they're getting. So we have to identify the business hours. And when will the children be picked up? Will it be 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock? Why is this important? Because you obviously will have to appoint staff. And remember, you can't have them working 6 to 6 every day, because that's a 12-hour workday. And if you look at 12-hour workday, you will work 60 hours in a week, while the Basic Conditions of Employment Act says you can only let them work 45 plus 10 hours overtime. So you'll have to keep that in mind when you look at business hours. Also, the fee structure must be handed in as part of the business plan to the department, where you've got to indicate of people only when you look at children for the morning, for instance, or on a daily basis now and then, or if they are there permanently for 5 days a week and they are there the full hours. Obviously, you will have to create a fee structure, because there's food to that, and there's other supervision, salaries, and electricity and water that you'll have to put into the cost regarding that. Then the daycare plan, meaning what are you going to do every day with the children? You cannot bring the children into the facility and say, okay, let them play the whole day. You cannot do that. There's got to be a daycare plan to ensure, for instance, that nappies are changed frequently, that other learners do drink water frequently, that they also visit the toilet frequently. We must take care that there is a care plan for this specifically. And then you have to have a staff composition, meaning you've got to have qualified people, but you can also have assistants. But the assistants cannot act on their own and supervise the children without a properly qualified person in charge of that. And I know the bigger aftercare centers these days appoint nurses, specifically because where I started, having a sick room for ill learners or children coming there and the medication to be applied, that it's quite easy if you have a qualified nurse to do that. And that should be available to do that. So you have to look at your staff composition and also maybe appointing people with specific skills, that you don't have to bring people in to do Xperi labs, but that you can use people that are qualified and working for you. Then if you look at the disciplinary policy, it's obviously there can't be a very strict disciplinary policy for the learners attending and babies and all of that, but there's got to be a disciplinary policy for staff members specifically, and a disciplinary policy cannot go out of the grievance procedure. So we have to be in mind with those two. Obviously, there will be a discipline for children becoming 4 or 5 years old, things that they might do and not might do. And I'm going to give you an alarming factor that most assaults of educators and supervisors and daycare givers is on the age of 5, 6 years old. They kick the people, they throw them with sticks, they throw them. So you cannot let that happen and just ignore it. There's got to be some discipline, but the discipline procedure will be aimed at having a discussion with the parents about the unacceptable behavior. And then we will have to make a decision, can the children continue there if they're a threat to other children or threat to property? Then we've got to make a decision if this child is still welcome there or not welcome. But we'll have to include that in a kind of disciplinary policy, and that will be part of your admission form when you enroll at that specific facility. It's got to be in there. Lastly, the constitution containing the name of the partial care facility, composition, powers and duties of management. That's basically how will this facility be managed, by whom, and what powers do they have. And this then links with the disciplinary procedure, where we will say powers and duties of management is, for instance, to ensure the health and safety of all learners and all staff working there. So if we have a learner coming there and being a threat to other learners and being a threat to the staff, we will have to interact, and we will have a power to say to this parent, we are cancelling our agreement with you. We cannot, or suspend, and listen here, talk to your child, try and convince him or get him on a program to change his behavior, and then he can come back. But that will be included in there, so we have to do that specifically. Otherwise, you will have a situation where there will be an outflow of children if you do not take necessary action against 2 or 3 people causing a health and safety threat specifically for that. And obviously, the powers and duties of management will be to act against all staff members that transgresses. It's not acceptable, and we've already bumped into this unacceptable cases where there was some physical giving a hiding to children, pulling their ears, doing all of that, putting them in a corner, not allowing them to go to toilet when they want to go. That's unacceptable. It cannot be. The powers and duties of management should be that they can act against the staff should things like that happen. Furthermore, if you want to register, and this is not part of when your facility is on a school ground, that you should have an original copy of the approved building plans. That's only when it's at a house or an external building, not on school grounds. You will need a copy of the approved building plans. An emergency plan cannot be only one plan. It might be a couple of plans. A clearance certificate, right? A clearance certificate from a health and safety inspector or building inspector that the building is safe and it can be utilized for what you want to use it. And then lastly, a health certificate from the local municipality, from a health inspector who will inspect your kitchen, will inspect your storage, your refrigeration, your preparation of food, the facility utilizing, how we do the washing of spoons used and cups used. those will all be inspected by the health certificate, and that will be done annually. You won't get one permanently appointed, allocated to you, proving that you've got a health certificate. There will be health inspections on an annual basis to guarantee that. Coming back to facilities on public schools, you will have to have an emergency plan, you will have to have a clearance certificate, right? And you will have to have a health certificate from the local government. However, you don't need an approved building plan for that specifically. What you would need instead of an approved building plan is a rental contract if it's run by an external party. Partial care facilities at public schools. Now, the question that you can ask me is, why do we run partial care facilities at public schools? And now, remember, this is not after school, and this is now from babies to grade RR. Why would public schools run that on their school grounds? Number one, it's to generate an extra income. It's to generate an extra income, a third income for the school. First income is school funds. Second one, the sponsors and fundraising. And then if we move to the third one, there's got to be additional initiative. And this can be additional. And what is as an SGB initiative, why would they consider that? Because you deliver a one-stop service. I drop small one there, learner in grade 1 and in grade 5, all of them, I've got a one-stop center. I stop all there, I drop all of them. In the afternoons, I come up and I pick all of them up there because the one is in partial care, the other two are at aftercare school, and I pick all of them up at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock night, and I drop them off at 7 in the morning. And I pay for those services. So that's an extra income. However, if the SGB uses this as an initiative for income, it's the SGB's responsible to ensure that all legal requirements are adhered to, meaning the health certificate, the inspection, ensuring health and safety, a safe playground, separation of all of that. The SGB must ensure that all legal requirements are adhered to. And then, because it's on the school grounds, the principal cannot walk away and say, this is not my responsibility. The principal still oversees the management of this partial care facility. And that is sometimes a problem because principals don't want to accept that additional responsibility, because it is quite a responsibility, accepting responsibility for babies and toddlers and where things can go wrong with smaller children. Obviously, parents are also much more concerned about what happens to those children. And then you will have instances where children have certain medical conditions like diabetic, treatment that they need and monitoring that they need. And you will have to decide if your facility is up to date and the people that you employed, are they firstly qualified? Are they prepared? And do they accept responsibility to do that? But we cannot. We bumped into a very recent problem where a child was enrolled at such a facility, but due to diabetic condition, the child had to be monitored basically every half an hour. So how are you going to fit that into your center? And I'm not saying we shouldn't cater for that learner. We must cater for that learner, but that is a specific need. So it might be a specific partial care facility to care for children with those exclusive needs like what I've just explained to you. If it's run by the school, the funds collected must be deposited into the school account, and it must be kept separately as a business unit because those funds must be utilized and that must be economic feasible then. So you cannot utilize school funds to subsidize this venture whenever there's a loss. And I know that the president very recently, I think 2,500 partial care facilities already now participated in the initiative created by the president to support partial care facilities, because partial care facilities had the worst part of the economics during COVID. A lot of them had to close their doors, people had to be retrenched. And if this facility was on school grounds, you will be tempted to use school funds to subsidize this venture. It might not be done. A further reason why you would use partial care facilities and preschools and after schools, it's a good marketing tool, because the majority of parents who are working parents do work from 7 to 5 or 8 to 5, and they cannot give the necessary care for the children during the day, so they're prepared to pay. And if they enroll the child with your school and he starts off at partial care and he moves over to grade R and he moves to grade 1, then he believes he's part of that school. So he fits into the culture of the school. And our experience is, if we visit schools, that's a very good marketing tool to ensure that you've got the sausage effect from bringing children in at the bottom and taking them through to finish the school at grade 7 in the instances of primary schools. It is also a question, can a public school then rent the facility out to an external individual or entity? Yes, a public school may, and you can look at section 20 and 21 of the South African Schools Act, where it says the SGB may rent the facility out to an external individual or entity. And what makes it possible to consider this is because it's not a conflicting activity, it's actually a complementing activity, meaning that we all are in education and care of children. So yes, if you don't want to manage it through the SGB in the school itself, then you might rent the facility to an external individual or entity, and they may then run in the school. Obviously, there will be a lease agreement, and part of the lease agreement will be to ensure that all safety and health regulations must be put in place. And we can also look at the maintenance of the building. All of that should be included in that agreement, but it is possible to do that. Important issues, however, is the facilities. Currently, there's a lot of partial care and aftercare facilities that's been closed because they don't have sufficient facilities, for instance, toilets, wash basin, running water, not properly enclosed when it should rain. What do we do in winter time when it's cold? So we must take care that the facility is maintained and expanded, and also caters for all of these weather conditions and everything that might happen. Secondly, staff. There's a lot of pressure on preschool to start at 6 o'clock in the morning. So you deliver children at 6 o'clock already, they dropped off and they must go. So if you look at the staff there, the component, you need specific people that are qualified already 6 o'clock in the morning, but they must also work up to 6 o'clock at night. And that leads us to the third point. You will differentiate on your contracts. You'll have to specify in the contracts working hours, how it's going to fit in, and you cannot disappoint a person purely from 8 to 5 working in a partial care facility or in an aftercare facility. The other challenge is kitchen and meals, where a lot of these partial care and after school facilities rather opt to have food delivered. Instead of cooking it on the premises, you have it delivered at a price, right? But then you move away, you don't need the facility, you don't need that staff component, and furthermore, then the health and safety for the preparation of food can be included in the contract to the service supplier who delivers the food. So you can take it away, but however, it seems that in the majority of schools, it is much cheaper to prepare the meals themselves, but you run the risk that you have a lot of other factors playing a role. Remember, I've already mentioned the person has TB. Then you don't, because it's not your risk, it is the person who supplies the food. Health and safety plays a very big role, because if somebody, a learner or even an employee gets injured and you don't fulfill the health and safety requirements, then the entity might become liable for that injury. And that is even on school premises, independent or public, and there's not health and safety precautionary measures put into place, they can run into a civil claim for specifically if there was some negligence regarding this. Access zones of these facilities are also very important. We had an experience a year or two ago where at a partial care facility, a 4 or 5 year old boy, I can't remember, got out through the facility because there was not enough security, and he walked back to the home. and that was about 1 kilometer away from the school. And when he got to his home, he stood in front of the gate. Obviously, there was nobody at home. So the neighbors came out, and the neighbors phoned the parents to say, listen, your little boy standing on the pavement outside your house. And obviously, you can think about all the problems caused by that. So access control and access to different zones, meaning the different age groups, we've got to be very, very aware that we should take note that we should have things in place, because that boy that got out nearly got ugly, and we had to negotiate with the parents, and the school immediately, they demanded certain measures to be in place, and the school could not ignore that because the loco parentis was lying with them, and they didn't actually look at that child properly as any other parent would have done. And that's what loco parentis means regarding that. If we go to aftercare facilities, meaning that is after school, right? And now the children are getting out of school, then obviously grade R's comes out before the rest of the school come out. So if you want to open an aftercare center and you cater for grade R people, learners, then you have to open much earlier, and then you have to cater then for the big school, the grade 1s to grade 7s coming out, or even if you're at a high school, from grade 8 to 12 will come out at the same time. However, the need for aftercare at high schools are lesser. The need for aftercare, meaning after school, is much bigger, and it's much more needed at primary school level. An aftercare center can be run by a public school or an independent school. Do you have to register? No, but if you're an external party, right, a rental agreement must be concluded, or you have your own property, or community centers can run after school. However, the norms and standards regarding the buildings is exactly the same as what it was before with the partial care centers. So you can run an aftercare center. Why would schools do that again? Again, to create income, but also to create a service, and also to use it as a marketing tool. A lot of parents that want enroll and they do inquiries at a school, the first question will be, what's your school fees? The second one will be, do you have an aftercare center? And then thirdly, what does the aftercare center cost? So the aftercare center cannot be subsidized from school funds, as mentioned. So it must be economic feasible activity that's starting. If the aftercare center is not on a school premises, you will need a zoning certificate. The building plans, you will need a certificate that you'll need the building plan, and you will need a certificate that the building is safe to be utilized as an aftercare center. And then you will have to have a health clearance certificate, because obviously if you have an aftercare center, children will bring their own food, but they're going to sit and eat somewhere. Or if food is supplied to them, we're back at the preparation phase, and what are we going to supply to the children, and where will it be prepared, where will the dishes be washed, where will the cups be washed. And the zoning certificate doesn't guarantee you that you're not going to run into problems, because we had a primary school that started the aftercare center directly next to a sleep therapist that were getting people referred by doctors for sleeping therapy. Now, obviously, you can think about the noise in the afternoon of the children. So obviously zoning, and that place was zoned for that. And, it was actually a fault, but it created a hell of a lot of problems for us. So when you do that, make sure that your zoning certificate is in place, but also make sure that around you, there's not a liquor store, or there's not a restaurant and with loud music and possible things that can influence the children's well-being in the aftercare center. Furthermore, the challenges experienced with aftercares are the contracts with parents. And the two questions: does it cater for non-payment? Meaning, what are you going to do? Remember, in a public school, and to a limited extent at the independent school, for school fees, you cannot just expel a child. The interest of the child comes first. So what are we going to do if we have an aftercare center and it happens that parents are not paying the fees required to pay, the non-payment? Can we just say, you're not welcome next month? Can we do that? It will all depend on the contract which you have with parents. Are they paying in advance? And that would be a good idea. So if you want your child to attend, you pay in advance, then he can attend. If you cannot pay in advance, obviously you cannot just say when the child pitches up the afternoon, listen, you're not welcome, go out. You'll have to deal with the child being there at that moment, and you'll have to deal with the parent making sure that the parent knows that the child cannot attend it without payment. But you'll have to include it in your contract and make it like a dispute resolution saying this is the procedure that will be followed and this is expected from you. And when you as a parent enter into that agreement, you accept these conditions of this agreement. So we will have to include that. And this is the big problem that we are experiencing of non-payment, and then suddenly you close the doors and then that child is without any supervision, and that cannot be done because it's not in the best interest of the child. Secondly, as part of the contracts, there must be a code of conduct and a behavior regarding bad behavior of a parent or a child. Why we say parents is because we often find parents coming fetching the children under the influence of alcohol, being very aggressive, swearing at the caregivers and looking at, swearing at people or even harassing people that are looking after the children in the afternoon. We also get parents that pitches up late and then the school must stay open for 1 or 2 children because the parents are somewhere doing something that they shouldn't be doing. Instead of picking up their children, they're staying away. So we will have to create in this contract a code of conduct where we say, how will we deal with bad behavior of parents? And this will be a dynamic document because I think everything changes. If I only think in social media, where parents reacting on social media, we should get something in there to limit exposure, unnecessary negative exposure. And then also the bad behavior of the child, what will happen with the child if the child misbehaves and, for instance, assaults an educator by kicking her. So what are we going to do regarding that? The staff contracts there is obviously because it's a shorter workday. On average, schools come out at 1 or 2 o'clock, and on average, children are picked up before 6. Again, the people are only working 5 hours a day. But then we move on to the next point. Parents don't only need you in the afternoon. They need these facilities during school holidays. And that's a question that we've got to ask. Are you going to stay open during school holidays? And if we look at specifically that, when are we closing in December? Are we closing in December? And when are we reopening? Are we linking it to school terms, or are we a business that open our doors and close our doors as it seems economic feasible for us? But should you stay open in holidays, you cannot just let the children come. You have to institute a holiday program, meaning what are you going to do with the children? How are you going to keep them busy? What are you going to teach them? What games are they going to play? Whatever are they going to do? Do you have the staff members for that? So that's a big question regarding aftercare. Are we open during holidays, specifically school holidays? And then if we are, what are we going to do with the children? And when do we close? And when do we close? Obviously, it's a good market. People are prepared to pay for that because they cannot take leave as the school holidays close, or when schools close for holidays. They are not free to close also that and stay at home. So obviously, there's a great need for that, and it's actually a growing need that we observe. Then security, the pickup of learners. You must make sure that the parents nominate. A lot of parents do have businesses and they do have drivers. And then the drivers pitch up at the school, but we recognize the driver that's been there for the last 3 years, but suddenly there's a new driver. Can you just release that child to that driver, a person that you don't know, that introduces himself to you as the driver of the parent's business, and they had the instruction to come pick them up? We have to make sure that we exactly know who are appointed by the caregivers or parents to enable us to release the children to the right people late in the afternoon. And you cannot release them and they travel with other parents unless there's a permission, and we propose to you that permission must be on paper. It must. The other challenge regarding aftercare is sport and culture activities, because what happens is currently it's a situation where there's very limited sport and culture, but if everything should normalize, you might bump into the situation where you get children actively participating in sport and culture. Are they then attending only one day, or if you have 5 hours of supervision, they only attend 2? What is the control going out of the school, coming back to the school? If he goes and he exercises athletics, what time will he leave? What time does he come back? And that's creating a problem regarding supervision and accepting responsibility for children. So that is something that schools will have to attend, and external bodies that runs aftercare centers. You have to look very carefully at the sports program of schools. And if you release a child to go and exercise, when is he coming back? What is the security regarding that? How are you going to make sure that he's going to the sport, or is that the parent's responsibility? And the big question with aftercare centers is then, remember, you're looking at school children, but then shouldn't we be open before the school starts also? We are available in the afternoon when school closes, but shouldn't we be available in the mornings due to the fact that parents drop off children early at school? This is becoming a serious problem in schools, and where we had 2 examples where we had to explain to the Human Rights Commission about children playing on the pavement in front of the school because parents dropped them off there. There was no other facility. Are they going to be under supervision of the security guard at the school? Will the school create a safe area for them? Or are we going to open up your aftercare center in the mornings, maybe at 6 o'clock to 7:30 when the children go to school, and maybe supply them with breakfast? It might be a new business venture, and it might also be that parents do need that in the morning, but they don't need it in the afternoon, and you can actually include a contract where the learners only admitted in the mornings to enable them to have to be there under supervision, maybe have a breakfast, because it's quite early for that. And that's a new challenge and a new need coming that we've heard from the schools. Popular entities for operating personal care and aftercare centers are trusts, non-profit companies, and companies or clubs. If you need information regarding that, you must not hesitate, but you must contact us so that we can see if it's needed, and if you need to maybe do some research, which one would be the better one. You can contact us for advice regarding which legal entity will be the better to use for partial care or aftercare center if it's not run by the school, by the SGB, and it's run by an external person. But you get a lot of people in the community that wants to work for the school, meaning they want to create a income stream for the school and not necessarily only for themselves. And that might be a non-profit company that's established, and it will be a company registered as a non-profit company, and they might then raise funds, and the funds might be going back to the school. And that's a popular thing happening these days, because all schools are in need of money, and if the community and the members of the community that even want to establish a trust to the benefit of the school, they may do so. They may do so. I hope you've enjoyed the session. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage. And don't hesitate to contact us if you need more information regarding or advice and handling specific issues and challenges at aftercare centers and preschool centers. But I think these 2 institutions, or as preschool aftercare, all of these centers are here to stay, because parents are both working, and it will always be that both are employed, and children will be in need to be supervised. And we've got to look at this, because I think it's an expanding business with the amount of learners coming to schools. Should grade R become compulsory for schools, then there would be obviously be more children streaming to schools, and the need for aftercare centers will be growing immensely. So this is a business opportunity actually coming up, and maybe a venture for the SGB to create funds for future and do some planning and create a business plan, because there can be benefits to the school. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope you see you again with the next training session on Thursday. Thank you very much.